Today is also commemorated as National Hot Cross Bun Day in US. These buns are dedicated. This day is dedicated to this tasty treat. These buns are delicious any day of the year. A hot cross bun is made from yeast dough and is usually a bit sweet. Some may even contain spices such as cinnamon, along with raisins, currants, or other dried fruits. Most of us prefer having a hot cross bun for breakfast accompanied with a cup of coffee or a glass of warm milk and always with a generous dose of butter. They make for scrumptious and filling breakfast food. Many stories claim that the origins of the hot cross bun, but one believes that the 13th century Anglican monk baked these buns to share with others and marked them with a cross in honor of Good Friday. The buns back then might have a hand of bland taste, but they were meant to be shared as shadow of friendship and love. By the 16th century, these buns have been introduced to Elizabeth England. The Queen decided to keep these buns sacred, and the law was passed to limit the sale of buns to Christmas funerals. And the Friday before Easter, the law was too difficult to enforce and was eventually scrapped off. People rejoiced and started baking cross buns throughout the year. Some superstitious people believed that these buns had medicinal or healing powers, while others believed that these buns baked on Good Friday would never go stale. Others were opinion that hot cross buns would ward off evil spirits, and a few others claimed that buns protected sailors from shipwrecks while on sea voyages. Although hot cross might have existed before Christianity, these buns have been historically only eaten on Good Friday as a Christian symbol of crucifixion. However, in many places, hot cross buns are now widely sold and eaten practically every day of the year. The superstitions also seem to be fading since these buns are no longer used for any other purposes than having a fill when you are hungry. So this day is also commemorated as No News is Good News Day in US. This is an interesting occasion that is marked in US every year on September 11th. While it may seem amusing, you would be surprised at how much bad news affects the general mood in the public atmosphere. But no good news is good news day and can take a break from 24 hours news cycle and focus on more positive thoughts. As technology continues to make it easier to connect with literally any part of the world, being able to switch off from the endless information and frenzy is becoming important. On this day, you can take a breather and shield yourself from worrying about the news by going offline. Although this day is native to the US, its origin and history are largely unknown. However, the pressures of social media, shenanigans, and political conflicts sprouting daily, not forgetting climate change, it's becoming very necessary to unplug from the time to time. Staying away from the external information can greatly improve the quality of your mood, which consequently boosts your productivity. But most times it's hard to maintain high levels of motivation because our timeline schemes updated on every single conflict happening anywhere in the world. With practically everything these days beginning and ending on social media, there's always a full storehouse of content to keep your phone surfing for hours. And even though it feels like most online content is pretty harmless, they can subtly influence their audience and the choices they make. A day when everyone can unplug from friends is a great concept and deserves to be adopted globally. Unplug from the internet and switch off the TV, pick up a board game, or take a stroll to the beach. When you give it much thought, you'll realize that there are endless activities you can do on No News is Good News Day. Apart from the psychological benefits of having peace of mind for a full day, you'll feel energized and refreshed when you get back to mix of things. And as more people strive to achieve a better work-life balance, this day is bound to gain more recognition in coming years. The King of England writes down the quote, "No news is better news than evil news" in 1660. The book writer James Howell references the phrase in his book in 1640. No News is Good News Day begins to be marked in the US in 21st century. No Good News is Good News Day is observed across the world on September 11, 2021. The expression is commonly used to describe the absence of any news from a source that is known for reporting bad news. This is due to the media's use of negative bias to boost their bottom line. Spin, clickbait, headlines, and exaggerations are used to achieve this. For publications, bad news attract a lot of attention and generates a lot of revenue as well. It was in 1640 that the use of exact expression was first recorded in English. It was James Howell who wrote I am of the Italian's mind that said, Nola Noa, Buona Noa, no news, good news. So unplugged from the internet, while the internet might not have a switch button to turn off, or you can choose to ignore your devices on No News is Good News Day. With so many events happening worldwide, there is always something awesome and often on the timeline. But on the day you choose to ignore the internet and focus on some natural observation. No News is Good News Day is a splendid opportunity to catch up on those bestsellers you have brought, but you haven't had the time to touch. So dust it up, pick a spot, and read something that isn't news. Nothing helps in the mind soar as easily as good steady stroll. All you need is your headphones. And your favorite playlist is to give a steady rhythm. Use this day as a chance to visit somewhere serene and enjoy nature's beauty. Christopher Columbus discovered the Americas. It wasn't until Christopher Columbus made his first voyage to the North America, 1492, that Europe began its real colonization of the continent. George Washington is the only president to have received a perfect 100% of the Electoral College votes with no opposition. One of the most significant post-Civil War developments in the United States was the abolition of slavery. More than 5 million alligators are thought to be roaming around the southern states of the United States, with 1.2 million of them in Florida alone. America has the highest number of alligators. Hawaii was the 50th state and the 50th star on the flag when it adopted its current design 62 years ago, with the 27 versions of the US flag. No News is Good News Day is a great opportunity to de-stress by limiting your exposure to outside information. It's much easier to think clearly and make plans when you are not stressed out. With so much going on in this world at any given time, we inevitably hear something that causes concern. And most of the time, we end up worrying around things we can't change. On the other hand, No News is Good News Day. You can enjoy a full day of positive thoughts. We become increasingly disconnected from our physical surroundings as we continue to upgrade our devices. Daily, unplugging can allow you to see things that are new to you because news and internet are no longer available to you. Today is also commemorated as Patriot Day. Patriot Day gives all of us time to reflect on the devastating terror attacks that took nearly 3,000 lives. We commemorate those who we lost and give thanks to the brave first responders who put their lives on the line. Take a moment day to consider what we stand for as a nation and how we work together to make a world a better place for all. The bravery of American citizens and an informed personnel in the face of one of the world's most terrible terrorist attacks is remembered on Patriot Day on September 11. It was a terrifying day when 4 planes were hijacked on September 11, 2001, also known as 9/11. The hijackers flew 3 planes into iconic buildings, the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., and the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York. The 4th plane crashed in field of Pennsylvania after the plane passengers fought the hijackers. Nobody is certain where it was supposed to crash, but some people believe it was headed for the White House, the U.S. Capitol, the Camp David presidential retreat in Maryland, or one of the several nuclear power plants along the eastern seaboard. The impact of this attack was devastating. Around 3,000 lives were lost between plane passengers, those in the buildings that were struck, and frontline workers trying to save people. It was the biggest act of terrorism ever in the United States. Since then, airplane security has become stricter in many countries as they attempt to avoid a future terrorist attack by 9/11. The majority of lives that were people that worked in the Twin Towers, especially the floors above the collision point, as the people were trapped and stranded at the top of burning skyscraper. 411 men and women working in emergency services lost their lives trying to fight fires and rescue people from buildings. It was heartbreaking attack, which is why Patriot Day was proclaimed by President George W. Bush and is recognized every year on September 11. On Patriot Day, US flags are lowered halfway and there is a countrywide movement of silence at 8:46 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, which is when the first plane crashed into one of the Twin Towers, although the attacks were in the US. Patriot Day is recognized worldwide as the news devastated and impacted all of. With this, we shall end today's commemorations. And as we missed a commemoration on September 9th, International Day to Protect from Attack, which is commemorated on September 9th, which is with the theme Armed Conflicts When the Noise of Gun Silences Education. Education is not only a basic human right in itself, it is essential to the fulfillment of all human rights. According to the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who says the important day reminds us of devastating impact of war on the bodies, minds, and spirits of young learners. With the knowledge, skills, and support gained through education, generations survive crisis and lead the world toward a sustainable future. This is particularly true for vulnerable groups, including girls, migrants, refugees, and people with disabilities, among others. Places of education should be safe havens for children, students, and educational personnel. However, all often they and the places wherein they learn become either direct targets or collateral damage in conflict affected contexts. Attacks on education can have serious long term physical and psychological repercussions for students and teachers. Attacks can suspend teaching and learning, lead to significant increase in dropout rates, and prevent students from accessing their right to quality education. The incalculable cost of children caught in the conflict held the UN Secretary General Annual Report on Children and Armed Conflict for the year 2023 represents a harrowing account of the violence endured by children in conflict zones. The report verifies a staggering 32,990 grave violations against 22,557 children, highlighting an alarming increase in such incidents. The data includes first time reports from Haiti and Niger, contributing to the broader picture of the 25 situations monitored. The most affected areas were Israel and occupied Palestinian territory, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Myanmar, Somalia, Nigeria, and Sudan. The violations were perpetrated roughly equally by armed groups and government forces, with armed groups mainly responsible for abduction, recruitment, use, and sexual violence, while government forces were primarily involved in killing, maiming, and attacks on schools and hospitals. The report underscores the devastating impact of explosive weapons in populated areas, which not only cause death and injury, but also hinder humanitarian aid delivery. The alarming number of school children who suffered grave violations in conflicts during 2023 is a wake-up call, according to the Special Representative of the Secretary General for Children and Armed Conflict. Virginia Gamba declared that we are falling children and called on the international community to recommend to the universal consensus to protect children from armed conflict. She also called upon the member states of the organization to fulfill their primary responsibility to protect their populations and respect all norms and standards applicable in conduct of armed conflict situations. The day was established by unanimous decision of the UN General Assembly, calling on UNESCO and UNICEF to raise awareness of the plight of millions of children living in countries affected by conflict. The resolution proclaiming the day was represented by the State of Qatar and co-sponsored by 62 countries. The General Assembly resolution affirms that governments have the primary responsibility to provide protection and ensure inclusive and equitable quality education at all levels to all learners, especially those in vulnerable situations. It further emphasizes the need to intensify efforts and increase funding to promote safe and protective school environments in humanitarian agencies by taking all feasible measures to protect schools, learners, and educational personnel from attack, refrain from actions that impede children's access to education, and facilitate access to education in situations of armed conflict. UNESCO and UNICEF will facilitate the annual observance of the day in close collaboration with partners within and outside of the UN system. Working on the front lines in conflict affected areas, affected countries, the Union entities have long assisted member states in strengthening their capacity to provide access to quality educational opportunities for all times of crisis. The Safe Schools Declaration was opened for the state endorsement in also Norway in May 2015. It was a political commitment to better protect students, teachers, schools, and universities during armed conflict to support the continuation of education during war, and to put in place concrete measures to deter the military use of schools by endorsing the declaration. States commit to restoring access to safe education and to developing education systems that are conflict sensitive and to promote respect between social or ethnic groups. So with this, we conclude today's commemorations. Thank you everyone for joining us in today's commemorations. So see you all tomorrow at the same time with the same joining link. Take care. Good night.